The movie opens on New Year's Eve in Baltimore with several parties in full swing, and people drinking and having fun. But then, all of a sudden, the celebration turns to horror when a mysterious sniper begins shooting and killing from a distance. The sniper appears to be utterly ruthless, opening fire on several buildings and killing anyone in sight. Not far away, we meet rookie police officer Eleanor, who's caught in the middle of a minor dispute between a cafe owner and a drunk customer. Suddenly, she receives an urgent call, ordering all units handling non-critical tasks to respond to a nearby plaza. Eleanor immediately heads out, and we learn that the cold-blooded sniper has already shot 25 victims, 17 of them confirmed dead. Shortly after, Eleanor arrives at a house where a poor teenager has been shot through the window. The police then discover that all the bullets have been fired from a certain 17th floor apartment in the neighborhood. But just as they make this discovery, the same apartment suddenly explodes, throwing the entire building into chaos. The terrified residents begin fleeing in a frenzy. During this, a stunned Eleanor starts recording a video in case the shooter is trying to escape with the crowd. Next, the police and firefighters head to the smoke-filled building, with Eleanor among them. They soon enter the exploded apartment and discover that nobody died there. Meanwhile, Eleanor struggles to breathe amid the smoke and briefly loses consciousness. But a detective named Mac quickly gives her an oxygen mask and helps her get stable. Just then, the chief FBI investigator, Jeffrey Landmark, arrives, and the team informs him that the flat belongs to a Norwegian man who is currently in Oslo. It turns out he got this place as a debt repayment and has been trying to sell it ever since. The scene then cuts to the police station, where Landmark briefs the team on key points they need to keep in mind during the investigation. We later see him suggesting to Deputy Governor Capleton that all the highways be shut down to prevent the murderer from escaping, but Capleton refuses, saying that doing so would cause public panic, which would be bad for the governor's image. Afterward, we see Eleanor and another cop talking about the killer, which catches Landmark's attention. He then asks for Eleanor's insight, and she suggests that the killer is trying to satisfy some form of inner relief. That is why he ended up killing 29 people, otherwise, he might have stopped after like 2. A surprised Landmark asks why he didn't go on to kill more, and Eleanor responds that maybe he had satisfied his urge for the night. She also believes that he will strike again soon, and Landmark is struck by the weight of her words. The next morning, Eleanor gets a call from her superior, who informs her that Landmark wants to meet her as soon as possible. The confused woman heads to a cafe, where she finds Landmark once again arguing with Capleton, who still refuses to take any precautionary measures. After the deputy governor storms off, Eleanor sits with Landmark, who reveals that he wants her to join the FBI team. This shocks her, and Landmark explains that it's not just because of her sharp insight, but because she appears to have a messed up mind like the killers. Just then, Detective Mac arrives, and Landmark announces that the three of them will be working as a team from now on. Next, the trio arrives at the morgue, and a cold wave of dread hits them as they face the 29 lifeless bodies of the victims. They realize the killer is highly skilled and probably military trained, because no ordinary person could execute so many with such precision. Landmark notices they vary in race, age, and gender, which means there's no clear pattern or connection. Just then, an officer rushes in and urgently gives shocking news that the cops have found the killer. We later see the trio arriving at the location, where the SWAT team is already surrounding a building. Another FBI agent, Frank, reveals that the suspect is a teenage boy who lives right above the apartment that exploded. During police questioning, he locked himself inside and threatened to kill everyone. Frank adds that the kid checks every box, as he has ADHD, skips school due to constant bullying, watches ISIS videos all day, and is obsessed with violent video games. Furthermore, his uncle took him to a gun club last summer. But despite all of this, Landmark doesn't think the teenager is the killer. Eleanor points out that there was a mattress in the exploded apartment, and questions why would it be there if the killer lived right above. But Frank refuses to consider these reasons, and soon, the SWAT team breaks down the door and confronts the teenager. The boy is consumed by panic, and in a desperate attempt to escape, he jumps out of his bedroom window, falling to his death. After this disaster, the police discovered there was no weapon with the boy, meaning it was a false lead. Frustrated, Landmark decides to contact the painters, who were hired by the owner to paint the apartment 2 years ago, since they had access to the keys at the time. Soon, the three painters, Rodney, Haynes, and Dimitri, show up for questioning. Landmark asks each where they were on New Year's Eve, and all provide solid alibis. Rodney appears to be a chill guy, but Haynes and Dimitri are furious after being accused of murder for a job they did years ago. The scene then cuts to a few days later at a mall, where we see an old man try on a cloth, and when he takes another clothes to try on, another man enters the fitting room. Soon, the old man complains that his clothes have gone missing in the changing room. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, we see a mysterious guy giving himself body wash. Turns out he's the one who stole the old man's clothes. Another guy who noticed him feels disgusted and informs security. The security immediately heads to the bathroom, but the thief is already gone. Luckily, they catch him in the cafeteria, where he's attempting to steal leftover food. The guards repeatedly ask him to open his bag, but he stubbornly refuses. And then suddenly,
open the bag! Open the bag! Fuck!
Eleanor at a gun shop, questioning the owner to gather any information about the weapon the killer used. But their conversation is abruptly interrupted when she receives a call about a horrific incident. Eleanor soon arrives at the mall, and her heart sinks as she sees the place filled with numerous dead bodies of civilians and officers. She then joins Landmark and Mac in the security room, where they review all the CCTV footage. They discover that the killer is thin, white, and over 6 feet tall, but his face is hidden behind a hood in each frame. They notice his original shirt before heading to the bathroom and decide to collect it for DNA analysis. Eleanor observes carefully and states that the man didn't come here to kill but to get food, clothes, and clean up. They also notice he only picked vegetables from the plate, indicating he's a vegetarian. Landmark emphasizes how flawlessly he killed everyone, implying that he was not only trained by the army, but also born among skilled shooters. They watched in horror as the killer carefully placed several grenades in a trash can, which he used to kill multiple officers at once. Unfortunately, the cops can't find the dumped clothes in the bathroom, as they've already been taken away by the garbage truck before the shooting. Clinging to any hope, Mac and Eleanor soon arrive at the landfill, and frantically search for the killer's clothes among the mountains of trash. Elsewhere, Landmark is under heavy pressure from his superiors in Capleton, who cares only about protecting the governor's image. Mac and Eleanor, meanwhile, return with the killer's clothes, which provides all of them a glimmer of hope. Just then, a news anchor broadcasts footage of the mall incident, urging viewers to contact him if they have any leads on the killer. Eleanor continues her investigation into the three painters, and upon reviewing Rodney's bank statements, she's shocked to discover that he was working multiple jobs at the same time. The lab results from the killer's shirt also come in, revealing several traces of brittle hair, commonly found in individuals who have suffered serious head injuries. Meanwhile, on TV, calls from people start to come in, and one man speaks very oddly, claiming he's proud of the killer soldier. He reveals that he is part of a group called the Invisible Army, which is fighting against the rigged system. When the news anchor doesn't believe him, the caller threatens to kill him, and even go after his daughter, who is in her college dorm room. The man seems to know a lot of details about the killer, so the FBI traces the call and manages to track his location. Without wasting any time, the FBI boards a helicopter with a SWAT team to capture this caller. They also learn that he's a member of a gun advocacy group called the NRA and hates the government, liberals, and Jews. They manage to get his name, locate his car, and begin following him. Landmark and Eleanor are skeptical because the real killer is a loner, and not affiliated with any group or ideology. But they have no choice but to follow the orders of their superiors and the governor. Shortly after, the caller and his friends exit their truck and head into a store, laughing and bragging about how they humiliated the news anchor and scared the cops. Eleanor and Mac also go undercover, and follow them inside to keep a close watch. Eleanor then quietly warns a few civilians, and urges them to leave the store. But tension spikes when an old man doesn't catch what she says and asks her to speak louder. His voice draws the attention of one of the thugs, who immediately becomes suspicious. Just then, more officers arrive, and they draw their weapons at the thug group. An intense exchange of gunfire erupts between them, during which most of the thugs end up getting shot and killed. Only one of the men remains alive, and he tries to shoot at the officer, but he's tossed with a stun gun. But in a shocking turn of events, when the guy is arrested, he reveals that the whole thing was just a prank, and there is no such thing as the Invisible Army. The following day, a disciplinary committee accuses Landmark of incompetence, and making a series of poor decisions that resulted in the deaths of many people. Landmark tries to explain that it was not his decision, but the senior official insists that it is his responsibility to maintain control because he is in charge. She even points out that Landmark recruited Eleanor, who was previously rejected by the FBI and had a history of addiction. Landmark tries to defend Eleanor, but it's clear that the senior officials aren't interested in logic, as they just want a scapegoat to take the blame. Following a lengthy and intense meeting, Landmark and Eleanor are both stripped of their roles and removed from the investigation. Upon returning home, Eleanor is devastated by the turn of events and collapses into a complete mental breakdown. Then, she suddenly has a moment of clarity, and rushes out to meet Rodney in the middle of the night. She immediately confronts him about working multiple jobs at once, implying that he was outsourcing the work to others, one of whom could be the murderer. Rodney initially denies everything, but when his wife screams at him to tell the truth, he finally agrees to confess. Afterward, Eleanor summons Landmark as well, and Rodney confesses that he used to hire immigrants, ex-cons, and men nobody else would hire. These guys worked for next to nothing, but Rodney brought them lunch every day. He reveals that there was one particular man named Dean, who was vegan and didn't eat dairy or meat. When Rodney inquired as to why, Dean explained that he used to work at a slaughterhouse and stopped eating meat after that. Rodney nervously reveals that Dean's height and build matched the description of the man who killed people at the mall. Upon hearing this, the officers immediately call in a sketch artist, and Rodney helps create a portrait of Dean. Since there are only 3 slaughterhouses in town, the officers decide to visit each one in their desperate hunt for the killer. They show various workers the sketch and ask if anyone recognizes the man, but to no avail. Fortunately, at one location, an old woman instantly recognizes him as Dean Posse. She describes him as an introverted, hard-working individual who never caused any trouble. But there was a supervisor named Alonso, who relentlessly bullied Dean for his oddly shaped head. So, one day during their last shift at the hamburger section, Alonso mysteriously met a gruesome death in an accident. Dean claimed that Alonso accidentally fell into the meat grinder, but everyone knew he was deliberately killed. Dean was thus sent to jail for the murder, but was released after only 2 years. Later, Eleanor reads Dean's files and learns that his father was in the army, and also his shooting instructor. It turns out his parole was supported by letters from 2 of his father's army friends. He was shot in the head as a child, and though he survived, he suffered severe childhood head trauma. They also discover that Dean has no credit cards in his name, no home address, and no social security number, making him a complete ghost. Shortly after, they arrive at Dean's mother's home, where Eleanor wants to call Mac for backup. But Landmark urges her not to, since calling Mac would mean the whole FBI would swarm in and risk messing up the operation. Just then, Dean's mother, Mrs. Posse, arrives, and the officers begin questioning her about her son. The woman seems aware of his actions, but refuses to cooperate, fearing they will kill him. But when Landmark assures her they just want to catch him alive, she reluctantly invites the officers inside. Next, Mrs. Posse reveals that the last time she saw her son was during the pandemic. She says Dean used to be a happy, smart kid, but when he was 6, his father accidentally shot him in the head, almost killing him. Dean managed to survive the injuries, but he was never the same again. As he grew up, he began to despise the world around him and became socially isolated. She also reveals that Dean's father had been training him for the army, but he was rejected because he wasn't violent enough, at least not back then. Meanwhile, Eleanor looks out the window and notices 2 cups of tea and a man's shirt hanging outside. She also spots a small shed in the distance and tries to warn Landmark, but it's too late. In a shocking turn of events, Dean shoots Landmark from the shed and kills him instantly. Mrs. Posse urges Eleanor not to move, or she will be dead too. She reminds Eleanor of her promise to keep her son alive, and asks how she plans to do that. The terrified officer then gives Mrs. Posse her phone and gun, and asks her to persuade Dean to surrender. With this, Mrs. Posse heads outside, and begs her son to stop the murder spree and surrender. She says Eleanor can help him, and with his medical history, she can keep him out of jail. However, when Dean doesn't respond to anything, the old woman grows increasingly frustrated, and shockingly unalives herself. Witnessing this, a remorseful Dean finally exits the shed and walks into the main house, still holding a gun. He then reveals to Eleanor that his rage stems not from a personal grudge, but because he deeply hates modern society. Eleanor gently tells him she understands why he despises society because she, too, has had similar feelings at times. After a long intense conversation, Dean begins to trust the officer, and declares he will go and lie with his dead mother. He then requests that Eleanor shoot him after he falls asleep and burn his body, because he doesn't want his corpse to appear on the news. Eleanor agrees to this request, but just then, a police car shows up, shocking both of them. Dean assumes Eleanor tricked him, so he strikes her with his rifle, and drags her into the basement to tie her up. Outside, an officer orders Mrs. Posse to open the door, but Dean doesn't waste any time in shooting him. Another officer calls for backup, only to be brutally shot as well. Soon, more police arrive and surround the area, while Eleanor desperately begs Dean to stop the madness. She pleads with him to untie her, promising she'll handle the cops and help him. Outside, the officers become impatient and decide to open fire, but before they can do so, a bomb goes off. Eleanor takes advantage of the chaos and brutally bites Dean's neck. He's badly injured, but instead of retaliating, he spares her and walks outside with a rifle. Moments later, Eleanor manages to free herself and stumbles out of the basement. She finds Mac outside and urgently tells him that Dean is wounded but still alive. Meanwhile, we see the killer fleeing into the open fields behind his house. More police cars swarm the area, and they finally spot him collapsed, with his bleeding neck. As Dean slowly raises his weapon one last time, the officers fire a hail of bullets and finally end his miserable life. In the final scene, Eleanor meets with her superior in Capleton, who insists on keeping the entire operation under wraps, so that all credit goes to the FBI and the governor. They even offer her a position as an intelligence analyst in the FBI in exchange for her silence. However, Eleanor refuses to comply with their terms, and demands that Landmark be posthumously honored with the Medal of Valor, and his pension be transferred to his spouse. She also expresses her desire to become a special agent rather than just an analyst. The superiors agree with her terms. The movie ends with the officials leaving for a press conference, while Eleanor returns home alone, still shaken and haunted by Landmark's death. Thus, we reach the end of this movie. Thanks for watching. If you like the movie, support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next movie. Goodbye.